Hello, and welcome to Coffee on Korriban. Welcome back to the show, to this special Echo-based TV broadcast of Coffee on Korriban. And if you enjoy the show, please be sure to check out my main channel. I would love to have you there, maybe have you on a live stream. We can have some great Star Wars discussions. The topic of today's video is, what is it about Star Wars? Specifically, what is it that keeps us invested? What is it about this fake universe that keeps drawing us back? And for some of us, takes so much of our time to study the history of this non-existent place. Well, in this video, we are going to explore that. And after talking to a bunch of people on Discord and YouTube, I think I've got some answers as to why we enjoy Star Wars so much. So when it comes to the people that watch Star Wars, I believe they fall into 4 different categories. The first being action. People want to watch it to be entertained. They want to see flashing lights and lasers and space battles. And if they get that, they're happy. They don't really think too much more about it. They don't go into the lore or the deeper history. They just see entertainment and they're happy with it. Maybe they'll watch it again a few years later, but that's where they stand. I believe this is the weakest reason for people to watch Star Wars because action can be found anywhere, namely the sequel trilogy. And the sequel trilogy was not short on action. I think we can all agree on that. But there's got to be something else other than just visual entertainment that keeps us interested in the Star Wars universe. So that leads us to the characters. And if the characters are relatable, someone that you can identify with, you're going to want to invest in that character, in their story. Maybe you really like Han Solo, and so you buy all the Han Solo books. It's not me, I just happen to have these books. Maybe you love the relationships between those characters. Maybe you love the way that Han and Leia have their unspoken love, where when she finally admits, "I love you," as he's about to be frozen in carbonite, all he can say is, "I know." And let's just be honest, they did such a good job with the character design in all those movies, from Luke's hero's adventure starting out as a farm boy, to Leia starting out as the snobby princess, and Han Solo starting out as the emotionless smuggler who's just in it for the money and saving his own skin. And we see where their characters progress over time, and if you love that character development, you're going to want to invest farther. I've said before, action is not memorable. It takes quite a special moment for action to be something that sticks in your brain and that calls you back to watch that media again. But character development, if you identify with that character and you really understand what makes that person think and why they do the actions that they do, the different mental battles that are going on behind the scenes, you know what their brain is thinking of and why they do those things. The next reason why people invest in Star Wars is nostalgia. We love this. Some of us grew up on this. I didn't come into my love for Star Wars till later on in my life. I didn't really grow up loving Star Wars, but a lot of people did, and especially if you grew up during the original trilogy. You grew up with these characters, and then when we got the prequel trilogy, you got more backstory, whether you liked it at the time or not. And then for people such as myself who basically grew up on the prequels, that is what your nostalgia is. The pod racing scene is so nostalgic for me. Anytime I see the pod race, or any sound effects that they use during the pod race, I'm instantly sucked back to my childhood. Just thinking about it. It's a bulbous pod flying by. And this is something that sadly the sequels lacked. You would think that having our favorite characters back on screen again would feel nostalgic, but it just didn't. If I may go on a little rant here. Luke Skywalker is now a hermit. That's not nostalgic, that's disappointing. Leia and Han Solo got a divorce, basically. That's not nostalgic, that's just sad. We could have had a chance to have all of our favorite nostalgic characters back together in one scene. But we didn't get that, and we never will. That's not nostalgic, that's a wasted opportunity. But all that to say, nostalgia is what brings a lot of people back. We feel the same way watching these movies and learning more about this galaxy as we did when we watched the movies the first time. And then the last reason why people invest in Star Wars and really love the Star Wars franchise and the Star Wars galaxy as a whole is the world. In discussing why people are invested in the Star Wars universe, one phrase kept coming up more than the others, and that was world building. So what is it about the Star Wars world that keeps us coming back? Is it possibly that our world, our real life world, is just too awful and we need Star Wars as an escape to get out of the politics and socioeconomic situations that we find ourselves in, and we would rather live in the Star Wars universe? And so we invest our time into learning about the Star Wars universe, even though it's not real, because it's better than what we're currently living in? I think also there's just so many possibilities in the Star Wars universe. There's so many planets with different characters and different species and different civilizations and cultures and religions, with millions of planets and trillions of beings. There are so many possibilities as to what we can encounter in this universe and what we can learn from all of them, each with their own history of how the planet came to be. But I think for me, Star Wars makes me feel like I'm there. It makes me feel like it's a real place, whether that be realistic looking places like Naboo or outlandish and fantastic places like Coruscant. And sure, there is the suspension of disbelief that you have to allow when you're watching these movies. But when you do, if it sticks within the framework that is the Star Wars universe, you get so much out of it. That might be a little bit too philosophical and maybe a little deep for some of the viewers, so I'm gonna go ahead and break it up here with some responses from you guys, the community. Mr. 2 Star Wars Nerd says, "For me, it is how real and lived in the world building feels. It truly feels like a galaxy far, far away." Lord Crit, my 500th subscriber, says, "I think the character development and world building keeps me invested." The Padawannabe says, "Mr. Lucas's inspiration and willingness to share his idea with other creator collaborators, to expand and keep the idea relevant, fun, and congruent without exploitation." And our commander, X-Wing, says, "I've always been interested in the blurring of lines, good and evil, even when it seems so black and white. It is often so complicated and muddled gray. Also, the impact that love has on the series. 1 through 6 for me were always a story driven on love. Anakin's love for Padme, Luke's love for his father." So that should give you a pretty good idea about how the community, and specifically the ones that I talk to on Discord pretty regularly, feel about why we love Star Wars. So let's go through the different eras of Star Wars real quick, and I'll briefly go over the world building that takes place in those different times. So the prequel trilogy is my favorite. I know a lot of people might be offended that I don't hold the original trilogy in the highest reverence, but to me, that's the most interesting part about it. I love the world building in the prequel trilogy. Everything from the Phantom Menace, when we see the Trade Federation and the blockade and the invasion of Naboo. This is all like real world stuff that would actually happen, and I love to see how the governments are ran. A lot of people don't like the prequels because of all the politics involved. That's one of the main reasons why I love the prequels, is because of the politics. Because if there really was a galactic senate and they were handling things poorly, there would probably be a separatist army and an uprising that they would want to have their idea of how the universe should be ran. And with the intergalactic banking clan and the Pikes and the spice cartels, this is all super interesting stuff for me. I love the world that is presented in the prequel trilogy. This is amazingly interesting stuff for me, and I love this type of world building that takes place during the prequels. The original trilogy, by comparison, feels small as far as world building. We get an idea that there was a much larger universe out there, but we're only seeing a small part of it. And with the prequels, and especially the Clone Wars and all the subsequent shows and literature that's come out since, we know what's going on in the galaxy at this time. So we know that the galaxy is much larger than we see in those 3 movies. And that, I think, is the hidden genius of the prequels that so many people don't recognize. It filled in so many gaps and really supplemented the original trilogy in a way that we get to understand what is going on in the larger galaxy. How did we get here? What are the bigger ramifications for the different little story details that we see? And of course, shows like the Clone Wars, The Mandalorian, Rebels, and The Bad Batch give us so much more supplemental information that just fill in gaps to the stories. And for all the people that didn't really love The Bad Batch, Nick, I think we should be grateful and take a step back real quick and just appreciate all of the world building that we got. Because after Order 66, we really had no information about how the government transitioned from the Republic into the Empire. And we got so much of that. Everything from the implementation of the chain codes, to the ships getting tagged, to the occupations on planets such as Ryloth. How did planets that were aligned with the CIS transition into the authoritarian rule of the Empire? How did they start phasing out clones? What happened to Camino? How did they start using stormtroopers? And we wouldn't have had any of that if it weren't for the Bad Batch. So maybe you don't like Omega, maybe you think the finale was a disappointment. I have another video on that. But the amount of world building we got in the Bad Batch is actually pretty astounding for only 16 episodes, a couple of which you could be argued that they were just filler episodes. And I, for one, am really thankful for the show for delivering on that. The extended universe is, well, extended. And that's another brilliant thing about Star Wars, is the more you dig into it, the more there is stuff to dig into. For example, most of us probably know that Darth Bane was the one who implemented the Rule of Two. But how many of us have actually read the Bane trilogy? I hadn't until a few months ago, and it blew my mind. Obviously, I know that he was the one to start the Rule of Two, and after that there was only Master and Apprentice. But his story, and how he got to that point, is truly incredible. And all the worlds that he goes along the way, it makes you feel like there's real places with real people just living out their lives. And speaking of people just living out their lives, I think Rogue One was great at that. I mean, on Jeddah, in the city before it's destroyed, we see people just living their lives. We see the little rebellions, but we also see people just in the marketplaces. And we got to see what that world is like from the rebellion standpoint as they're fighting in the trenches on Scarif. Yeah, I got some palm trees. And that brought a realistic taste to Star Wars that I don't think we had before. Because spaceship battles and starships and giant Death Star lasers are cool, but when you're on the ground with the rebel forces and the giant AT-AT is standing over you, sorry, it's an AT-ACT, you get a sense of scale that is just mind-blowing. And another thing that really demonstrates a sense of scale is something that Father Time brought up on my last live stream, and that was, in the opening shots of The Force Awakens, love it or hate it, we got to see Rey scavenging on the planet. And you might hate Rey, you might hate how her beginning was the exact same as Luke's, basically, but just the fact that she's on the ground with all of those Star Destroyers and seeing how massive those ships are is something that's actually really incredible, and something that I forgot about in my hatred for the sequel trilogy. As far as world building, the sequels might have a lot of planets and different places, but it feels cheap. I don't know what it is about it. It's hard to put it into words what it is. Maybe the places were too fantastic, which is saying something because this is Star Wars where basically anything is a possibility. But like the casino planet, I don't even remember what it's called. It's like, they didn't seem like real people that lived in the universe. I don't know exactly what it is about the sequels, because they did visit a lot of planets and different locations in the sequel trilogy, but it just didn't feel like the same world. And one of my upcoming live streams is just going to be completely bashing on the sequel trilogy and actually talking about why we don't like it. We're going to try to keep it rational, but I mean, a lot of us really don't like the sequels, so we'll see. And I understand that the feeling of Star Wars is completely subjective, and it's going to be different for everyone else. But it seems to me that the common theme that unites all of our special feelings towards Star Wars is the world itself. And let's not forget, Star Wars is a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, but in our universe. So this is a distant history. These are things that actually happened in our universe just a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. So let me know in the chat down below, what is it about Star Wars for you that keeps you invested? What is that special feeling for you that keeps you gravitated toward this franchise? And if you liked this episode of Coffee and Korriban and would like to see more, I humbly suggest that you subscribe to my channel. I would enjoy seeing you there. I would like to thank you for watching Echo Base TV, and I will see you wherever I happen to see you in the galaxy.